Happiness comes from subtraction. Now, when we think of this idea of happiness, we usually think of happiness in a positive sense. And what I mean by that is that we think that the only way to happiness is by adding certain elements to our lives. And these elements can take on or can be in the form of money, it can be in the form of materialistic possessions, it can be fame, limelight, it can be recognition, it can be social circles, friends, etc. So we think that these elements, by adding these elements to our lives, this is the only way that we can achieve happiness. But my dear brothers and sisters, what if we've been going about it all wrong? You see, this idea of happiness through subtraction rather than happiness through addition, as I put it out, it might seem counterintuitive. But in the context of feelings, in the context of thoughts and emotions, getting rid of the ones that are hurting us could actually bring about happiness rather than adding the ones that could help us. Because you see, it's difficult to feel free, it's difficult to feel light with all of this baggage weighing you down. And the case could be made that all of the things that you are trying to add to your life in order to make yourself happy, in order to be happy, will just end up making your baggage even bigger, will just end up burdening you further. Now let's look at a few subtractions that we can look at implementing in our lives in a move to live happier and lighter with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subtraction number 1. Subtract negative information from your life. Now this can be in the form of social media and in today's landscape, the news. Now before I go further and unpack this, I want to establish that with regards to news that affects you, it's important that you keep yourself informed and you shouldn't be ignorant in this regard. You should keep yourself informed. Now, you're in the middle of a pandemic, and if there are important announcements that the health authorities of your country, your area are putting out, then yes, you must keep yourself informed with regards to the guidelines, etc. You must keep yourself informed. Now, that on one end, and the other end of the spectrum, where you have people consuming negative headline after negative headline. Now, this is going to leave you far more worried, far more anxious and sad. Now, occasionally consuming the news is helpful, but when you overdose and overdo it, the news, these outlets, they basically portray a very negative, very extreme, and because that's what, sells basically, So you have this negative, extreme and biased view that you're being fed, and they make it look like there's more violence, more conflict and more strife than in reality. And what we have to bear in mind is that most news, it doesn't affect us at all. Now, if it does affect you, then yes, you keep yourself informed. But for example, a hit and run in another town. Now, does this affect you? I mean, yes, it's sad that it happened, but does it affect you? It's happening in another town. Okay, let's say some tragic event in another country. Does it affect you directly? It doesn't affect us, So as human beings, we only have limited mental energy each day. You really can't handle this overload of information, headline after headline. So when you know, my dear brother, my dear sister, that you only have this limited stock of energy, why spend it on these negative things that you have no control over? So this is a powerful question that you need to ask yourself. And again, I want to reiterate that this is not about ignorance. It's about knowing that certain things aren't worth the impact on your mental health. So you need to pick and choose. You need to know. If you keep overloading and feeding yourself this huge flow of negative information, it's going to have a very drastic impact and take a huge toll on your mental health. Now let's talk about social media. Generally on social media, what happens? People, they tend to only share the best things that happen in their lives. Now individually, there is nothing wrong at all with that. All of us, we are on social media and we post the happiest of our moments. And if you look at how social media has been structured, you've got filters to make these ordinary moments look extraordinary, right? So everybody is posting their happiest of moments. You've got filters to beautify and decorate these moments, and you put it all out there. Now, studies and research is being established that so individually these are the things that are being put up, but in terms of consumption, as people consume all of this, they start to feel unhappy with their own lives in comparison. Why? Because they're comparing their lives with the lives of others. So instead of using social media today to catch up with one another, a lot of us use it as a tool to keep up with the others, to kind of find out what the others are doing, to keep up with the others. Now researchers, they basically write that on average, Facebook users, they spend more time examining the pages of others than actually adding content to their own. Ask yourself, when was the last time you posted something, So rather than adding content to their own pages, people use Facebook. Not that I'm saying that you never post content, but when you compare your usage, you spend more time examining the pages of others than actually adding content to your own page. And researchers also go on to write that all these social media sites, their most frequent visitors are people who use the sites for social surveillance. And these quote-unquote social investigators, they aren't really using these sites to get in touch or stay in touch with their friends and family, okay? They use these sites to check up on them and to see what they're doing, where they are at, what they're eating, where they are checking in terms of their locations and things like that. And research also goes on to state that the average person spends about 2.5 hours every day checking social media. Now this can have another negative impact, okay? Because now you have the link between screen time and your health. The more screen time, the more you spend time on these screens, you obviously, number one, wasting a lot of your time where you could be doing good things, okay? Positive things, impactful things, and on the flip side, it's also having this very negative impact on your health. So this is something that we have to bear in mind, and this needs to be reduced and subtracted. The negative information, it needs to be subtracted from your life. Moving on, subtraction number 2. Subtract the bottom 20% from your life. Now you have something called the Pareto principle. Now this principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of the causes. Other names for this principle are the 80-20 rule, you have the law of the vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity. You have all these names that are in place for this particular principle. So now based on this principle, I want you to assess what are the 20% of things that cause 80% of unhappiness in your life. And you also need to assess and ask yourself, what are the 20% of things that cause 80% of your happiness? And you need to be really ruthless here. Identify the 20% that's actually causing 80% of your unhappiness, okay? And eliminate. And I said be ruthless because this is your life at the end of the day. We're not negotiating anything else. This is your life that you're talking about. You're trying to achieve, you're trying to become more productive, you're trying to achieve, a greater heights in life. So you really need to assess and scrutinize yourself very diligently and carefully in this regard. Subtraction number 3, subtract negative people. I posted a quote the other day on my social media. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Don't underestimate, my dear brother, my dear sister, don't underestimate the power of the company around you. If you surround yourself with good and positive people, they are going to propel you forward. On the other hand, if you surround yourself And by the way, this is not to say that we are hinging our success or our happiness onto someone else. Now, we will discuss in just a bit that you're not supposed to be doing that. But here, your company has an influence on you. So, if you hang out with the wrong type of people, they're going to drag you down. May Allah protect us. You hang out with the right type of people, they're going to propel you forward. And we even have the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to guide us in this regard. Hadith is in the book of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, and I'm paraphrasing, the narration goes along the lines of these words. The example of a good companion who sits with you, okay, in comparison with a bad one. So you have a good companion, you have a bad companion. The comparison, the parable that the Prophet ﷺ puts forth is like that of the musk seller and the blacksmith. Allah Akbar. Look, the good companion is like a musk seller, a perfume seller. The bad companion is like a blacksmith. It's a parable, it's a metaphor. Not that you can't have, not that you're supposed to only have friends who are perfume sellers and not have friends who are blacksmiths. Now that's obviously not what the Prophet ﷺ is saying in this hadith. It's a parable, it's a metaphor. And the Prophet goes on to say, from the first companion, the perfume seller, you would either buy musk or you would enjoy its good smell from that individual. So think of it this way, you have a good friend, okay? Now by being in the company of that individual, you will inherit, you will take on some of the good traits of that individual, or at least it will rub off on you. It will rub off on you. See, even if you don't buy perfume from a perfume seller, let's say you have a friend who owns a perfume store, you go in, there's bound to be free tester bottles, you're definitely going to spray some on yourself, and you will come out of the store sweet smelling. But on the other hand, if you've got bad company, it's almost like going into the furnace of a blacksmith. By going in there and coming out, you're going to come out with your clothes, at times accidentally burnt in certain places. You're going to come out with the smell of soot and coal. So this is the comparison given to a bad companion. If you hang out with the wrong type of people, you will eventually get your clothes burnt. You will eventually come out smelling, full of soot and coal. There's this nasty smell that comes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us, and may He help us to maintain right and positive company. Moving on to the next subtraction. So I think I'm at subtraction number 4 now. Subtract, my dear brother, my dear sister, subtract the desire to prove yourself. Now let me establish something. There's nothing wrong with having ambitious goals. Ulubul himma, as the Prophet ﷺ and as our deen teaches us, we're supposed to have high aspirations. We're supposed to dream big. We're supposed to have lofty intentions. Yes, there's nothing wrong with this at all. But what we're trying to establish here is that these goals, these lofty ambitions, should not be pursued in order to prove to others, in order to prove something to others. And more importantly, it shouldn't be done to prove even to yourself. You see, today, ask yourself, my dear brother, my dear sister, deep down in the heart of your hearts, why are you doing this? A lot of us, we do things to prove things to others. We're doing it, I want to prove them wrong. I want to prove to so and so this. I want to prove to so and so that. Or I want to prove it to myself. And they go about doing all these things, these lofty things, scaling great heights in this pursuit of proving things to others or themselves. So they are obsessed with proving their self-worth. They are obsessed with validating their existence. They are obsessed with showing off that they are at a certain level. My dear brother, my dear sister, you need to stop trying to be perfect, and you need to stop trying to prove yourself as worthy. You need to do more things for yourself, for happiness, and keep more announcements to yourself. Because you have to understand that when trying to prove to yourself, you're going to be in this constant rat race where you are chasing this standard of perfection. Now, this is something that even I grapple with, where you're never going to be content, you're never going to be satisfied with what you achieve. You're not going to celebrate your successes. You're going to constantly keep grappling with yourself and beating yourself up. That, oh, I should have done better, I should have done this, I should have done that. And you keep doing this to prove to yourself. If you're not proving it to others, you're doing it to prove to yourself. And you're constantly grappling with this standard of perfection. I'm not happy, I'm not content, I'm not satisfied with what I'm doing, I'm not satisfied with my standard. So this, my dear brother, my dear sister, is going to keep you in this negative abyss, in this negative and dark abyss. So yes, you must have this healthy balance. You have lofty goals ahead of you, and you're constantly pursuing those goals, yes. But along with that, you also need to be happy. You need to be content, and you need to be happy with yourself. You need to be able to celebrate your little and small moments of success. This leads to a life full of light and happiness. Moving on to the last subtraction for this video, subtraction number 5, subtract attachments. Now, like we said at the inception, at the beginning of the video, some of us think that we can't be happy until we have certain things, until we have this, until we have that. Okay, and we go on to attach, and I'm not just talking about materialistic possessions here. It could be anything. Some of us think, oh, if I have so and so, or if I have a spouse in my life, I'm going to be happy. But eventually what happens? Spouse comes, and this individual, there is this moment or moments of happiness, but eventually it dies down. Because this whole concept of attaching your happiness onto things, be it wealth, health, relationships, possessions, money, this just doesn't hold up under psychology. When you achieve something, you feel happy, and then what happens is you adapt to that happiness, and it becomes the new normal, and then you lose that happiness, and then you try to achieve something else. And this cycle, it keeps going on and on and on, and there's actually a name for it. It's called the hedonic treadmill. Now, this concept, it is the observed tendency of humans to quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events that take place in their lives. So basically, at the end of the day, if you can't be happy without those things, then you can't be happy with them. If you can't be happy without those things, then you can't be happy with them. Now again, we're not trying to say that you should not try to achieve things in life. Instead, what you need to be doing is you need to reach your goals without making your happiness depend on them. Now what I'm trying to say is that this doesn't mean that, I can't aim to buy a nice house. Now, there's nothing wrong with you buying a nice house. There's nothing wrong with you driving a nice car. As long as you don't attach your happiness, you don't hinge your happiness onto those things. If you don't hinge your happiness to those things and to dunya in a holistic sense, because I'm just going to touch on that in just a bit, as long as you don't attach your happiness to these things, it creates far more freedom, far more ease, and far more peace in your life. And once you have arrived there to that healthy place, my dear brother, my dear sister, even if you happen to lose what you have, you won't be as devastated because it was never the source of your happiness in the first place. Now that's a very important point. And this is why you need to condition your mind. You need to work on your mind to arrive at this healthy place. I'm just going to conclude in this point that you're not even supposed to attach yourself to life. Now this is the mindset of a believer. The Quran constantly reminds us of what? Death. Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, every soul shall inevitably taste death. And look at the Prophet ﷺ's words, Akthiru dhikra hadimil ladhat. Make excessive remembrance of the terminator of pleasures, of the destroyer of pleasures. Now does this mean that Muslims, believers, are basically living in doom and gloom and in this negative abyss of darkness where, they're constantly thinking, I'm going to die tomorrow, so what's the point of even living? That's not the understanding here, my dear brother, my dear sister. Let me give you an example. Think about it this way. If you were given nobody, is going to get that notice. But if hypothetically you were given a notice stating what? That you've got another 1 day to live, 24 hours, one more day. Now let me ask you, how do you think you would spend that 1 day? Would you spend it in doom and gloom? Would you spend it in negativity, just brooding away like a chicken? Or would you want to make the most out of that day? Because you know that this is your last day to live. Would you not want to make the most out of it and make it the most impactful day of your life? Yes, you would. So that is the mindset of a believer, day in and day out. Why? Because you could die the next minute. So basically what our deen teaches us is to make the most out of every second, every minute that we have. Because why? We could die the next minute. So we need to live our lives to the fullest. That's the teaching. Not to live a life of doom and gloom. No, live your life to the fullest. So coming back to what I was establishing earlier on, there's nothing wrong in trying to get a good house or to drive a nice car. No. Allah says, وَبِتَغِ فِي مَا آتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. That's the balance. Yes, seek the abode of the hereafter. وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. And do not forget about your share of this worldly life. But the crucial point, my dear brother, my dear sister, is do not attach your happiness to these things. Because these things are all temporary. They're all going to fade away, including your own life. Including your own life.